Shalom everyone, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves Jonathan here, and we are almost 1 week into Israel's war with Gaza. And what I would want to try to do here is to give you a weekly summary of what Israel is facing, how this all started almost a week ago on the early morning hours of Saturday, October 7th, around 6:30 p.m. in southern Israel. What has happened since then, where we are now, and where this is going. I cannot believe that I'll be able to cover everything, and there will be details that may not be in this summary, but what I'll try to do is to go through the main events, the key timeline here that has brought us to this situation that we are in today. I'm happy that you're following us, and I really encourage you, if you enjoy our content, we will do our best to provide more content like this and even better content. If you like, you know what to do. Subscribe, share with your friends. And if you have comments, we do answer the comments. If they're serious and professional, we do take our time and answer. And if you have questions about topics that you've heard in the media and you want me or any of the other Israeli spokespeople to speak about, write it and we will take that into consideration. So we are 1 week into our war with Hamas, a war that we neither wanted or initiated, a war that was forced upon Israel by a brutal attack on Israeli soil that resulted in more than 1,300 dead Israelis and so far more than 3,000 wounded. These are unprecedented numbers in our history. Never before in the history of the state of Israel have so many Israelis been killed on one single day. And in order to find a comparison, unfortunately, we have to go back to the dark days of the Holocaust to find any other day in Jewish history when so many Jews were murdered. And it was a massacre. In many communities in southern Israel, the communities around the Gaza Strip, which I'll show you shortly and you'll be able to see on the map. We'll go into detail and I will show you the places. The only word that can describe it was massacre. Israelis were butchered, they were tortured, their corpses were mutilated, they were executed in their homes, either by bullets or by shots or by knives or by other instruments. They were burnt in their houses or suffocated alive, and then their bodies were mutilated. Hamas also took hostages. Not only did they kill 1,300 Israelis, but they have taken more than 100 Israelis hostage, and we are now still in the process of collecting the information and understanding and accounting for all of the lives that have been lost. Out of the 1,300, we've been able to account for more than 1,000. There is still a big puzzle to understand who is dead, who is missing, and who is presumed to be held by Hamas as hostage. A word about the hostages. Who are they? There was a music festival that was held. If I zoom in on the map here, I'm sure that you're all familiar with the map of the state of Israel, and here is the area of Gaza that you can see here now. There was a music festival near a community called Re'im, here in the central southern area. I'll zoom in slowly. You see Re'im here. So in this area close to Re'im, you can see the border with Gaza here, and then this Israeli community, and the area here where there was a big music festival. We found the bodies of 260 Israelis there, most of them young Israelis in their 20s, who went to a music rave to celebrate the beautiful things in life that young people enjoy. They were there celebrating, and they were executed. Women were raped, men and women's bodies were mutilated, and many were taken hostage from that very occasion. Other areas that you may have heard about since this has been going on for a week, may be this community, Be'eri, which was simply decimated by Hamas terrorists who went in. They targeted this location, and they targeted the other villages. There was no issue here that maybe the terrorists were looking for soldiers and they wanted to. No, they did indeed kill soldiers as well, and there was fighting between soldiers and terrorists. That's another thing. But after that fighting was done, the terrorists made their way to their primary goal, which were Israeli communities. Be'eri was one such target. This beautiful kibbutz, I'll zoom in on it and you'll see how lush, green and well kept it once was home to about 1,000 Israelis. More than 100 of the people who used to live in Be'eri are now dead, and many are missing or confirmed as hostages at the hands of Hamas. Same story, unfortunately, goes for another Israeli community, Kfar Aza, which I'll zoom in on now. You'll see how close it is to the Gaza border. Kfar Aza here, the kibbutz, and then the Gaza border here. Now, a common denominator of both Kfar Aza, Saad, which is next to it, Nachal Oz, Be'eri, Alumim, many of these communities, they're kibbutzim, and the people who live in them are people that are gentle, they're humane, they have friends of old times in Gaza, especially the older generation. They care for the civilian population of Gaza, and they even employ Gazans who work in the fields and in the factories around in the area, because up until Saturday, the 7th of October, there used to be Palestinian workers who used to go out of this crossing here, the Erez crossing that you can see. This is the only pedestrian crossing between Gaza and Israel. You can see that there's a military structure there, and this is where they used to come in and out. So workers used to come out, about 20,000 every day, in order to provide money and salaries for workers from Gaza, for them to take it back into Gaza and provide for their families. The first target of the Hamas terrorists, the first area where they breached out from, was this same crossing. The same crossing that is a humanitarian crossing, where civilians are allowed out from Gaza into Israel for medical care, to meet relatives, and for other issues. And international organizations use this crossing to get in and out of Gaza from Israel. That was the first target of Hamas. And I think that again symbolizes the brutality of what Hamas did and how they thought. So that's how it started. We started with Hamas attacking Israeli civilians and butchering our civilians and killing soldiers. Since then, what Israel did was for about 2 days, even a little bit more than 2 days, to regain control over southern Israel. This entire area here, because we had terrorists who were able to get very far from the Gaza Strip. There were terrorists that got to various locations. They got to Ofakim, of course, to Sderot. They got close to Ashkelon, all of the communities around here, the area of Kerem Shalom, Cholit, and Sufa here in the south. Many of these communities were attacked, and it took us 2 days of fighting to finally clear the area and to regain control over our territory. We've since done that. We have plugged shut the border and made sure to reinforce the fence, which was breached by Hamas in multiple locations. Now that's closed, and the border between Israel and Gaza is defended and held shut by the IDF. That also took a lot of work in doing. We have mobilized 360,000 reserves, which is a very large force compared to the total strength of the IDF. We did that in less than 48 hours. That's the fastest mobilization of Israeli troops ever in our history. They are now deployed in all of the areas around the Gaza Strip. So I'll tilt the map a bit, and you can see that we have the Gaza Strip here in the north, all the way to the south, Egypt here, and this here is Israel. And we now have Israeli troops all over this area. Ground forces, infantry, artillery, armor, combat engineers, and many other troops that are in the south, in their tanks and APCs and their artillery guns facing Gaza, and getting ready for the next stage of our operations. I don't know, or actually I don't want to say when and what will come, but I can only say that we've mobilized lots of reserves and we are preparing for the next stage of our operation. Very relevant to that. This is the Gaza Strip. The biggest center is Gaza City. This is where about 1 million people live in this area here. And there's two other bigger cities, Khan Yunis and Rafah. But Gaza City is the place where most people live. This is where most people live. What we have done is to tell the Gazan civilians, if you want to have a bigger chance of surviving, and if you care about your safety, vacate yourself from the northern part of the Gaza Strip down to a place called the Gaza River, which is approximately here. Go down south, heed our warnings, and return to the north only when we tell you that it is safe to do. We do that because we do not want civilians in the combat area, and we want to minimize the risk for civilian casualties. That is because we fight according to our morals and because the civilians in Gaza are not our enemies, and it wouldn't serve anything good to have civilians in harm's way. That's why we're asking them to vacate the area. Sadly, cynically, these same civilians are being told by Hamas, that governs the Gaza Strip still, not to vacate, not to leave their homes, and to stay in the area. Now, why would Hamas do that, if not only to cause more casualties and to bring more suffering and death to civilians in Gaza? Hamas is responsible for everything that happens in the Gaza Strip. We didn't start this war. We didn't want it, but once it was forced upon us, we will launch this campaign. We will continue with our war until Hamas has no more military capabilities, until Hamas will not have the ability to threaten even a single Israeli civilian ever again. And if Hamas cares about the humanitarian situation in Gaza and they want to alleviate it, I have a very good suggestion for them. Release our hostages immediately, without conditions, and surrender unconditionally. Come over towards our troops, and that will be the end of the war in Gaza. But I don't think that Hamas is going to do that, because they have shown over the years, ever since they took control over Gaza in 2007, that their only focus is on the destruction of Israel, that they focus all of their resources on acquiring weapons, on building military infrastructure, and on developing weapons and on killing Israelis. This operation, this attack that they launched, they planned it well in advance, they practiced it, and everything was for a purpose. They went into Israel in order to butcher civilians and take them hostage. And that's what they did, sadly, unfortunately. And everything that happens now, Hamas is responsible, because we didn't start it. They are the ones who started it. They are the ones who targeted our civilians. And what we are doing is simply to defend ourselves, our civilians, and to make sure that it never happens again. I don't want to speak too much, and we have to conclude this briefing. In the next briefing, I could speak more about the regional aspect, about what's going on in the general region of the Middle East, what Hezbollah is doing, what's happening in Syria, what the Iranians are doing, some 600 miles or 1,000 kilometers away. Very important as well. And I think in due time, we will address those issues. And as of now, I would like to say that 1 week after the fighting started, after this atrocious attack against Israel, we find ourselves at war, a war that we are committed to ending by defeating Hamas and making sure that they will never ever have the ability to do this or anything else again. If you enjoy the content, if you find it useful, share. Make sure to tell your friends about the content here on IDF. If you want to watch other platforms in English, French, Spanish, we have them all. and we have all of the different media and social media accounts, Twitter or X, of course YouTube, Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. Whatever your preference is and whatever the type of information you like to consume, we have that type of information, and we stand by each and every piece of information that we disseminate. So I hope you find this useful. Follow us again next time. Shalom and thanks for watching.
Good.